So I started recording, and what I want to do today is just simply review what we covered yesterday with regard to modifying shapes, whatever you want to call it. They call it transforming them. It's editing them. There's any number of ways that you can do that. There isn't a single way. There are probably 3, 4, 5 different ways of doing the very same thing. So the first thing that they covered were the artboards. So if you want to access the artboards, and in the start file, we have a single artboard. You can tell that because we have multiple images, but look at the little white area hanging out from the bottom of the middle image. That is the artboard. If you're not sure, then what you can do is you can click on this little button right here to the right where it says Artboards, pop that up, and you can see that there is only one artboard. Okay, so this is how we can, this is one way of organizing artboards, of adding artboards, of editing artboards, of renaming artboards. It has its own little panel. Another way to do it that I prefer, which is the way that they started when they introduced artboards, was the tool over here, the Artboard Tool. So I select that, and you can see by default we have this artboard selected. If you want to make a duplicate of this artboard, just the same shape, then at the very top, all you have to do is click the little plus sign here. It says New Artboard, and it will make an exact copy of the one that you have. Okay. If you want, another way of doing that is just simply moving over to the left or to the right or the top or the bottom, and click and drag and create a brand new artboard. And then at the top again, you can specify the X, Y coordinates. And again, that can be based on the center of the object, and that's what this little widget is. Anytime you see this little widget, this has 9 little dots, and by default, the center is selected. But if you want to select a size based on the upper left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner or the bottom middle, by default, the center is selected. You can do that. And right now, everything is done in pixels. I'll show you in a minute how to change that. Well, I'm going to change the width of the pixels to 800, and the height, I'm going to change that to 850 pixels, which is what the book wants. And you have to put in the PX or IN for inches. And there we go. And I can go ahead and I can move this up. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to go down here. Now I'm going to move it up. And I can also make a copy of it just by holding down the Option key and clicking and dragging that over, just like you would any other object. The other day, I also wanted to align them, and it's a little bit different. You do have to select a key object for this, but I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Shift key to select all of them. And it should be, if I hold down, let's see, I can't remember, but it was the Command key. I think that was the key. And I can go ahead and I can align these all along the top. So no, I didn't do that. So let's try the Command key. Let's try the Option key. No, that's not it either. Oh, not doing so good here. Let's select. I had it the other day. It was really bothering me afterwards. And I normally just let's try Control. No, that's not it either. Well, I'll come back to that again another time. Anyway, if I want to, align them, you have to select a key object, and it's a little bit different when you're in the editing mode of artboards. Now that I can go ahead and if I want to edit the size of this one and make it the same height of the other two, one of the things that I can do is I can bring up rulers and guidelines. In order to add guidelines, you have to have rulers up. So that's Command or Control R to bring up rulers. And then I can click and drag from the top or the left of the rulers, and I can pull out a little guideline like so. And you can see it's in blue right now. Depending on the layer that you're on, it will be a different color. And I can pull that out there so that it matches all of these. So that's what that does. You can also determine the, when you're using rulers, if right now it's in pixels, but if you want to change that, there's two places that you need to go and check. You go to Illustrator, and you go to Preferences, and then you go to Units. Right now, it says it's in inches, but if I move that up, we can see that it's measuring in pixels. So why is that? Because I have to go to File now. This is the other place we need to go. And I need to go to Document Setup. We can see that it's in pixels. So if I change it from pixels to inches, now my ruler will be measured in inches. Notice where the ruler begins. It happens to start at the center, the upper left-hand corner of this center artboard. What if I wanted it to start to the upper left of this artboard, where the 0, 0 coordinates are? You move the mouse in the upper left-hand corner and you drag until you reach the upper left-hand corner or wherever you want the origin of the coordinates to be. And now you'll notice that 0, 0 starts here, not here. And that you can change at any moment, at any time while you're working. Okay. So let me go back out of here. And let's show you a few other things. One of the things that they wanted us to do was to, hold on here. I said this is going to be quick, and it's probably taken me longer than it should. Okay, how about sizing things? Anytime you use these modification tools over here, here's rotate, reflect, or if you want to use to scale or shear. Let's do the scale. Again, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do that. So I want to scale the size of our little guy here. And I'm going to make him about 50% of the actual size. So I can do that as I select it and I make the bounding box visible. If you don't want this bounding box visible, you can go to View and you can come down here to Bounding Box. Where is it? It says Show Hide Bounding Box right there, and that will hide it. It's still active, but it's there. Most of the time I like having it visible. So I'm going to go back up and make sure that that's there. You might want to check some of the other objects or elements here that can be made visible or hidden. And then I can move over the corner and I can hold down the Shift key and I can resize. Now, when I resize it, I don't know that that's 50% or not unless I was paying attention to the original size of it. And then at the top, under the width and the height, I can look at my measurements here. I can also change the measurements from here over to the right under the Transform panel over here, which duplicates or replicates or mirrors what we have here. I can change the width and the height here. You can make sure that you link the width and the height, or you can unlink them from here. Likewise, you can do that from here. Another way to resize it is to use the Scale tool. So if I double click and on that, it brings up the Scale tool. And if I want it scaled from the center, I just double click on the tool. I have uniform scaling, and I'm going to go ahead and click 50% because that's the size. You know, I wanted it half the original size. Do I want to scale corners? Do I want to scale strokes and effects? Let me show you what happens if I don't check scale, strokes, and effects. The arms are strokes. So if I click OK, notice how fat his arms are. I don't want that. So I should have selected scale strokes. The other thing that you can do is that you can scale not only from using this little center or widget here, but let's say I want to scale it from the bottom center. If I hold down the Option key while having the Scale tool selected and I click, it brings up the dialog box, and I can again specify 50% or whatever percentage you want it to be, larger or smaller. This time I'm going to select Scale Strokes, and notice where it scales. It will scale it from this point right here. Okay, so that's another way. So there's a whole slew of ways of scaling our objects. The same is true for rotating and skewing. So if I want to move this now and rotate it, I can go ahead and use our selection tool, move it up. And I prefer, unless I have some odd angle, just moving over the corner and rotating it. And then holding down the Shift key. And remember, when you hold down the Shift key, it locks in place at 45-degree angles. And now if I need to shrink it down again, I can hold down the Shift key, move down from a corner, and make it a little bit smaller, move it up like so. If I need to make it bigger, scale it up a little bit. So, very nice. Okay, so that applies to rotation, scale, and skew. Some of the other features that they have for rotating and duplicating are really very nice. So for example, I wanted to make the blades for the windmill here. So I'm going to put the first one in position. And now I need to make 3 additional blades. And I want, as I do that, I want to make sure that they're rotated at 90 degrees. So similar to what I showed you before with the rotation tool, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option key. I'm going to click because I want it to pivot about this point right here. So if I hold down the Option key and I click, okay, and I put in 90 degrees, and then I select Preview, that's 90 degrees. And now instead of selecting OK, I'm just going to select Copy. So now I have my duplicate. And to repeat that same process, I just need to hit Command D and hit Command D, and there I have all of them. Now what I can do is I can select all 4 of them and group them together, and I can rotate those as a group as well. Okay, so hit Command G to group them, to move over the corner, rotate, hold down the Shift key, and I've rotated it. So a very efficient way of rotating, of duplicating, and then grouping the objects, and once again rotating them again. Much quicker, efficient way to work than trying to do it manually by hand, one at a time. Some of the other things that they have available for us too are under the Effects tool. And these are some of the things that I really, really like. Let's start by changing the flower here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to move it up. I don't know if it's the right size or not. I'm just kind of guesstimating. Let's move it in position. It needs to be considerably smaller. So I'll just hold down the Shift key and move from the corner and make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So now if I want to duplicate this, similar to what I did with the blades, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option or Alt key, click and drag, and also hold down the Shift key to constrain the motion to horizontal. And now I have my first one, and if I want additional ones, just hit Command D. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command D, and I'm going to move this one over here. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the motion, the movement, so that it is perfectly horizontal. And now what I want to do, instead of a circle, I want to turn this into more, to look more like petals. So what I can do, since this is all of these elements have been grouped together, is I'm going to start to use some of the effects tools now. So I'll deselect. I'm going to select the group selection tool, and I want just the petal right here, just the circle, kind of orange or circle. And then I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to go to Distort and Transform, and I'm going to select Twist. You might want to check some of the others out, like Roughen, Tweak, Zigzag. What I want to use, though, is I'm going to use Pucker and Bloat. Okay? So if I slide this to the right, I get the little petals. If I slide it to the left, it pinches it. So I get kind of a nice star shape. Well, to make it look more like petals, I'm just going to move it in that direction just a little bit till we get our petals, and I click OK. And all of these, this can be changed. This is not a permanent change. You can always go back and change it. Another nice effect that we can do too, that we did the other day, is for the flags. We want them to look a little, instead of straight and rigid, we want them to look kind of wavy. So to do that, I'm going to select each one, and I'm going to go to Effect, go to Distort and Transform, and this time I'm going to select Twist. And I'm going to specify maybe 20 degrees and hit the Tab key, and now what it does is it makes it look a little bit wavy. Okay, so you would want to apply that to all of them. And you could, again, you can always come back and you can change that. This is non-destructive. It's you can always change that. And how do you change any of these effects that have been added? You need to bring up the Appearance panel. So what I'm going to do is go to Window, and I'm going to select Appearance. With the Appearance panel up, and I'll pull this out. When I select this object, you'll notice over to the inside the Appearance panel, it tells me the fill for the path. It tells me that the effect twist has been added. There is no stroke, and here's the fill color. And if I wanted to change the opacity from here, I could do that as well. Let's say I wanted to exaggerate, or I wanted to turn off the twist effect. I could just simply click here, and it's turned off. If I want to turn it back on, click the visibility of it. If I want to change the effect, I double click on the effects, and I can change it from here. And that would be true for the pucker and bloat as well. Do the same thing. Okay. So that's how that works. The other one that they had us work with over here is to work with, it's a one-point perspective using the free transform tool, and also using skew to make it look, again, that it looks like it's in perspective, in a two-point perspective. So the first thing that I want to do with this shape is to make it look like it's in perspective. So by selecting the free transform tool, which is this one here, I can select this middle one right here, and this is the one-point perspective. And as I click and I drag, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I have group selection tool selected. I don't want groups. I want the direct selection tool, or the selection tool, so the whole thing is selected. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. Selecting that one. There we go. So the whole thing is selected. Now select free transform again. And again, depending on which corner I have selected, whoops, I don't want to do that. Let's click again. Make sure that perspective is selected. And now when I click on the corner point and I drag, notice that it looks like it's in a one-point perspective and we're looking down, for example. we're standing on railroad tracks or the side of a building and looking at it in the wall of a building and looking at it in perspective. Okay. If I were to change that from this side, same thing. So that's that. If you want a free-form transfer or distort, you would select this one. And now I can click the corner of each of these and I can, you know, move them in any number of directions and distort them to your heart's content. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and use perspective, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger. But now I need to skew it to make it look like it's in a 2-point perspective instead of a 1. And to do that, we need to use the Skew tool, or the shear tool, which is hidden under here. And what I'm going to do, because I have difficulty myself controlling it, is I'm going to select from here, and I'm going to select an angle where I can select, do I want to select vertical or horizontal? I remember from the other day, I think we selected vertical. And now when I rotate this a little bit, there we go. Move it in the other direction, like so. That's pretty much how we want to do this. Okay, so I have preview turned on. If you don't see the effects. I like preview turned on. So now it looks like it's in perspective. It's receding in space, and as it goes back in space, it gets a little bit smaller. And again, if you need to make changes to it, you can always go back and hit a couple of undos and do that. I'll click OK. And we're going to do the same thing to the other one. I'll select this one. And again, I'm going to use the free transform tool and select perspective. Click and drag over the corner a little bit. And then again, I'm going to use the skew tool. I'm going to double click on it to bring up the dialog box. And I don't want it to go in that direction, 18 degrees. I want it to go in the opposite direction. There we go. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'll go ahead and move it in place. There we go. We'll do the same with this one. Just kind of move it into position. Okay. So these are some of the things that you can do to create more dynamic shapes without a lot of muss or fuss. One of the other things that they had us do that I really like is that we distort the little man here. And to do that, we're going to use the, it's right underneath here. It's the Puppet Warp tool. So I'm going to select Puppet Warp. Oh, I don't want everything warped. So I'm going to deselect that. Oh, you have to make sure that you select what you want warped first. Select Puppet Warp. There we go. Now I can zoom in. And I just want to notice that it has these key anchor points. And you can add to them or you can move them around. But I'm going to take this one right here and bend it up. So now his arm is bent and it contours and moves nicely with the rest of them. Then I can click on this one, his legs, and I can bend them up like so. So it looks like he's kind of you know, floating and in the wind there. Select off of it. Nice tool. It does, you know, it's not for everything, but it works really, really very nice. Let me show you a couple of other things that aren't in this exercise that you can do with this. So if I go to File, New, and that we've already done, but just to show you some other examples of things that we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and make a new file. So for example, what if I wanted to place dots about the edge of a circle, and I wanted them equally placed or equidistant? Well, what I could do is I could start by creating a little circle or ellipse, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and flip it. And I'm going to make the stroke none. So I want to place a series of polka dots or dots, circles, around the circumference of a circle. So the way that you would do that would be to use the rotate tool. And instead of rotating about the center, I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to click right here. Okay. Now, this was set at 90 degrees, but I'm going to go ahead and set this to 30 degrees instead. Okay. So you can see that it rotated a little bit. And what I want to do is make a copy of it. And now all I have to do is hit Command D. And I keep hitting Command D. And what I have now is a series of circles that are equally placed all around the circumference of another circle. Pretty cool. Now, what if I wanted all of these circles to be in perspective? Well, then I could use the Skew tool, or I could use the Perspective tool, that one that we used before. But to do that, I need to first select them all. So I'll select all of them, and I'm going to group them together. Okay. Command G for group. And now what I can do is I can select the Free Transform tool, which is right here. And I'm going to select this one right here, again, perspective. And I'm going to go ahead and move this like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and select. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And let's move it down. And now it looks like I have these discs that are placed equidistant to one another, but they are now in perspective. So a very efficient way of doing that, to try to make this by hand, each one of these separately, and make sure that they're all equal, is much more difficult. Similarly, what if I wanted to make a picket fence, and I wanted to create the shadow of a picket fence? Another way to do that, and again, these are just sort of random examples that I'm showing you today. I'll just do this, maybe a couple more, and that's it. Oh, come on. So, okay, there we go. So I'm going to start by making the first picket fence. And then we'll start with a rectangle. So I'll do that. So here's the first picket in my picket fence. And I want to make it kind of pointy at the top. So to add an anchor point, I go to the pen tool and I say that I want to add an anchor point. And I click right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit my up arrow a little bit and move it over. So I have the picket, one picket in my picket fence. Now what I want to do is I want to select the picket fence using the selection tool. Hold down the Option key and click and drag and move it over, and hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement to horizontal. So I made a copy, and now I'm going to duplicate that. Command D, 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 D. So there's my picket fence. Now what I want to do is I want to create a drop shadow for this. Okay, or a shadow. And it could be in front or in back of the fence, depending on where your light source is. Before I do, though, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a couple more rectangles here so that, you know, our fence would have a couple of horizontal elements like so. And I'll go ahead and I'll make a duplicate of that. So by selecting that, holding down the Option or Alt key, and also the Shift key, and moving it down like so. Now I have my picket fence. Okay, very simple. Now I need to group it together. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of them. And I'm going to hit Command G to group. And now what I want to do is I want to mirror this or reflect it, or however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. So that was under, not under the school, where is it? It's under the rotation tool, reflect. And I want it to reflect about here. Okay, so it's, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I click right here. and it brings up our little reflection dialog box. I want it to be horizontal. There's our preview, and I'll click copy. So now I have a duplicate of it. But depending on where our light source is, I want this to be at an angle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Skew tool. And again, if I hold down the Option key and I want it to skew about this angle, this point right here, you'll notice that I have, that's vertical, that's horizontal, and now I have it at an angle. So now I can go ahead and I can change the angle of this and make it a little bit more extreme. Whoa, that's a little bit too extreme. There we go. That ought to do it. Okay. And now if I want, I can change the opacity of it. I could change the color of it. I can change the position of it. So now it looks like the sunlight is behind the fence and casting a shadow. And now I can change the opacity of that. It's just so it makes it it's a little bit more transparent. In very short order, I've made my picket fence. Okay. I got to make sure that these guys match up a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So it's best when you're working to think in terms of symmetry. And if you can think also in terms of multiples and that sort of thing, and how would be the best way of duplicating or replicating your shapes with the least amount of effort and be at the same time be really accurate. And there are so many tools in here that enable you to do things like that. Okay. I'm going to pause my recording. Okay, so the question I have is how to create like a topographical map, multiple shapes that are repeated again and again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, let me try by just using the curvature tool. And I'm going to okay. So here's one shape, and I'm going to use an outline, but no stroke, and I really need to join these together. So I'm going to go ahead and use that join tool that I said was kind of a waste. I'm going to try that again. Where was that? Is that under here? No, I can't remember. It's a relatively new tool. Is it under the eraser? No. No. Looking under the same, some of the same things here. Well, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and move it over. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to join these together. So let me just select the endpoints. Like so, and do it the old way. And hit Command J to join. There we go. And now I'm going to use the Convert Anchor Point tool and make this a little bit rounder. Like so. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to make another shape inside. So let's try again. And this time I'm going to just use the pen tool, I think, just to make a little squiggly shape inside. Okay, so I have my two shapes. I don't know how this is going to turn out, to be perfectly honest. But what I want to do is I want to blend these two together. And to do that, you use the blend tool, which is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to click right here and blend them together. Now I can control the number of steps that that takes. So if I double click on this tool, you can see right now it says that it's in smooth color, but if I want specified steps, I can do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and let's say I want 10 steps. 10 steps. So let's click preview. Does that answer your question, Susie?
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you so much. That's exactly what I was looking for.
That's how you do that. And then if you want to change the width of them, you can do that. By default, it usually does a smooth blend. So if I go back under smooth, you typically need, you want to change colors if you do that. So let me cancel this and let me undo. There we go. So let me change the stroke width and the color of each of these. So I'm going to select this stroke and I'm going to make this one, I'll make this one kind of I'll make it an orange stroke. And a little bit fatter, maybe 6, so we can really see it. 6. And then I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to make this one 6. And make sure there's no fill too when you do that. And take a little bit more time in making smoother paths than I did. Let's go ahead and let's change the color of this. And let's make this one, I don't know what color. Let's make it blue. There we go. Now watch what happens when I blend them. And you can blend from 2 shapes or multiple shapes. It doesn't really matter. You can blend as many shapes as you want. So now if I use the blend tool, I can click from here, and then I can click here. One. Let's try again. Click here. And click here. There we go. Notice how that blends smoothly? It's like it's an old-fashioned way of making a gradient.
That's really cool.
But now there are some issues that you might have. So let me just delete all of these if you're not careful. So I'm going to delete that. Another way of blending too is, for example, what if I start with a square or rectangle? And let's go ahead and fill that. And I'm going to go ahead and make that, again, something like a red fill. And then I'm going to make a circle. Okay. So I'll go ahead and make a circle here. And I'm going to make this circle a green circle. And the same thing, I can blend these 2 shapes. So if I use the blend tool and I click here and I click, whoops, no, come on. Where's the blend tool? There we go. Click here and then click here. See how it blends the 2 together? But if I double click on this, if you want to create kind of a morph in between, the same thing under specified steps, because it's doing by default 256. But if I only want 3 steps in between, notice how it's creating the intermediate shapes. And not only is it creating the intermediate shapes, it's creating intermediate colors. So you can see that and for those of you who have any experience painting, red and green are complementary colors. So if you blend them together with paint, and right in the middle here, you get kind of a raw umber, you get a greenish brown. And then if you have a little bit more red, you get kind of a burnt sienna. And right now, you can also see a little line that's connecting these. You see that? So what I can also do is I can take my, my path. So let me go ahead and select the, I'm going to go ahead here, and I want to select the path here. And I'm going to change under the pen tool, I'm going to change the change anchor point, and I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to make that like so. And see how it follows? It's like close on a clothesline, where all of those shapes are connected to the clothesline, and as you change the path, it will change, they will follow that clothesline, and you can, it will be connected. There's a variety of things that you can do with this, like putting, if you wanted to make a pearl necklace or something like that, you don't need to make all the individual pearls. You can duplicate them, and then you can have them follow a path. And there's other ways of doing that as well.
Professor, if I were to start with a lined shape that was thicker in width and then end up with a thinner one, will it also do the width in between when I blend?
Will, yeah, it should blend the width as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to experiment to see what desired result you want.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So as you can see, kind of cool. And right now they're all connected with one another, but if at a later date, if you want something a little bit different, I can always expand. And I want to expand the object and fill. And now you can see that they're not connected anymore, but I have them all individual shapes. And if I select this, they are a group. So now what I need to remember to do is, if I want to leave them as a group, I can, or I can ungroup them. And now I have all of these separate shapes. So it's an interesting way of creating a kind of a morph from one shape to another. So yeah, that's what the blend tool does. You can blend shapes, and you can blend paths, and you can do smooth blends, or they can be in specific number of steps. And it should do all of the above. Let me try what you're suggesting here. Let me go ahead and just make a straight path here. I'm going to go ahead and like so. And I'm going to make this fat. And make it nice. Kind of a 10 point, maybe even fatter. About 14 point. There we go. And now I'm going to duplicate that over here. And I'm going to make this one much thinner. I'm going to make this one maybe a 2 point. And let's go ahead and make the colors a little bit different. So I'll make this one, again, kind of an orangish color. And I'll make this one, I'll make it kind of a deep color just for the heck of it. Now let's use the blend tool and see what we get here. So I'll click here. Make sure it's selected. There we go. Click and click. That's the smooth. Now you just use the gradient tool. But if I double click in here and I change it from smooth to specified steps, and I change it to 4, for example. See how it's changing the width as well as the colors?
That's extremely helpful. I can't wait to try it out.
Okay, well, cool. Yeah, if you can think it, chances are you can do it in here. It's just knowing where to look for the tools. And, the more you use each of these applications and the more familiar you become with the tools and what they're capable of doing. And I can't tell you how many YouTube videos there are. And if you subscribe to lynda.com, how many other tutorials that you'll find on unique and special ways of working with Illustrator as well as other applications. I don't know if you guys remember the orientation video, but I said if you go to LA County Library.org and you sign up as a member and you get a user number and a PIN number, that you have free access to lynda.com. And there you'll find a whole bunch of extra tutorials on Illustrator, not only the current version, but older versions, as well as Photoshop and InDesign and you name it, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so it's about 11 o'clock. Is there anything more that you guys want me to look at? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm also going to stop. Where am I here? I'm going to go ahead and. So if that's it for today, then I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and pause.